place of prayer, each individual soul joined in a community of worship. One God.
Alhamdulillah, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. This, inshallah, will be the most important khutbah I've ever delivered so far, so please pay attention, special attention this time. I will try to repeat the important points, and I want you to bear in mind that I'm talking to you. You. Don't say he's talking to somebody else. Recently, I have come to a very important conclusion about believing in God. And this started in the Muslim Perspective issue of February 1987 with the title, Satan Believes in God. It dawned on me that throughout the Quran we are taught that the majority of believers in God are going to hell. In Surah 12, verse 103, it says, most people, no matter what you do, will not believe. And then in 106, we're told that the majority of those who believe will go to hell. This is in Surah 12, verse 106. And then we read in Surah Al-Mu'minun, number 23, verses 84 through 90. I'm going to quote starting at 84. Say, to whom belongs the earth and everyone in it, if you know? They will say, to God. Say, would you then take heed? Or how come you do not take heed? Say, who is the Lord of the heavens, the 7 universes, the Lord with the great dominion? They will say, God. Say, how come you do not observe righteousness or do not observe God? Say, in whose hand is the kingship of everything, over everything? The one that can come to your help and does not need any help, if you know. They will say, God. Say, how come you have been bewitched, have gone astray? So, and in Surah 29, verse 61 says, if you ask them who created the heavens and the earth and committed the sun and the moon, they will say, God. And then the verse ends by asking, how come they deviated? In Surah 29, verse 63, it says, if you ask them who sends water from the sky to revive dead land, they will say, God. Say, praise be to God. How come most of them do not understand? So all these verses and many more throughout Quran tell us that people believe in God, Satan believes in God, but they are still going to hell. Now why? And the very important conclusion is, you do not believe in God unless you know God as He really is, with all His qualities. Namely, especially, that God runs everything, that God is doing everything. And this will shed a new light on our submission to God, our acceptance of whatever is happening to you personally or in the world, to anybody, to anything, to any country. We do not believe in God unless we believe that God is running everything. And at this point, I would like to suggest a dhikr for you, something for you to do. Every day, wherever you go, when you're driving or sitting or you have nothing to do, or even if you have something to do, I want this to dominate your life, even mentally, even when you're doing something. I want you to repeat always, God is running everything. God is running everything. This is your new dhikr, our new dhikr. Because it will, the whole world will look different to you. When anything is happening that may turn you into an objector, not a submitter, this will remind you that God is doing everything and that you are objecting. As a believer, you have no business losing your temper, for example. You're not a believer if you lose your temper. And as I said at the beginning of the khutbah, I'm talking to you. Don't say he's talking to somebody else. I'm talking to you. Yes, you, Abdullah, Gatut, Muhtasham, Ahmed, other Ahmed, Frank, and so on. I am talking to you, every one of you. You have no business losing your temper, because this indicates you're objecting to something God is doing. We must know that God is doing everything. Even the things that Satan is doing, they are following God's law. A good example in the Quran is before the creation of Adam, God is telling the angels, I'm putting on earth a representative. Which in a nutshell says that God, of course, knew that Adam was going to be duped by Satan and will go down to earth. Because when Satan tricked Adam, God said, go down to earth, all of you. But this, before the creation of Adam, God is telling the angels, I'm going to place on the planet Earth a representative, the human being. So even though Satan tempted Adam and Eve, God is doing everything, because everything is going in accordance with God's will. This is our new dhikr. When you're driving, when you're sitting, when you're doing anything, eventually it's going to happen mentally. Every cell in your body is going to say, God is running everything. And this is the true believer. This is the believer in God who will not go to hell. The majority of believers in God are going to hell because they do not believe that God is running everything. In Surah 8 verse 17, a classic example. It is not you who killed them. That was after the battle, one of the battles in early Islam. It is not you who killed them, it is God who killed them. It is not you who threw when you threw the arrow or the gun or whatever. It was God who threw. I mean, this is a very important conclusion, and this is why I think this is the most important khutbah I've ever given to you. This, I made a trip recently to Egypt, and everything that happened in that trip told me that we don't do anything. We do not do anything. God is doing everything. The timing of my arrival, the timing of my leaving. I mean, I get on the telephone and say, TWA, I'm changing my reservation from Tuesday to Thursday. I decided to change I didn't decide anything. I didn't change anything. Believe me, God is doing it. God is doing everything. In Surah number 12, again, the brothers of Joseph decided not to kill him, right? They decided not to kill him. They decided to throw him in the well. But before this happens, way before this, years before they make this so-called decision of theirs, Joseph sees the dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing before him. With his father, his mother, and his 11 brothers bowing before him. Something that was to happen after he's practically ruling Egypt as a man. So when the brothers met to kill him, the decision was already made. They could not decide to kill him. It was impossible. But here they are meeting, and they're taking votes. Shall we kill him? What shall we do with him? And then they decided, they think, not to kill him. God is running everything. And this is our new dhikr. Just keep telling yourself, God is running everything. Especially when you're at the brink of objecting to something or losing your temper. When you lose your temper, tell yourself, you must separate yourself from you as of now. When you lose your temper against a friend or a spouse or a brother or a sister or anybody in the street, you tell yourself, you're not a Muslim. You're objecting. Because God is running everything. Believe me, when your friend or your wife or your husband behaves in a certain way that gets in your nerves, God is doing it. And it's because you deserve it. So you have to get on yourself and correct yourself. And catch yourself objecting, not submitting to God. God runs everything. want to give you an example so you understand how God is running everything and how we have the freedom of choice. Suppose I had a temporary ability of traveling in the future, let's say for 1 week. I travel in the future and I see what happened to you, what decision you made. Okay, so I traveled all the way to next Friday and I saw exactly where you went, what kind of decision you made. Now back to this Friday, I'm giving you a choice to go to New York or to California. So I want to give you a choice to go to either New York or California. So I'm giving you a choice. You're going to freely choose California or New York for your trip. But I already know, see, because I traveled in time this 1 week and I know that you decided to go to California. So even though I'm giving you the freedom of choice, I know exactly what you're going to do and where you're going. But it is much more than this. I don't think we can really understand it. God runs everything. And this is the condition. This is a quality of God. And if you don't know this quality, you don't know God and you don't believe in God. And this is what the Quran means by all these verses. When Satan inflicts disasters, diseases, cancer on people, Satan is doing this in accordance with God's law. And we see this in the Quran. I remind you, for example, of the disciples of Jesus when they demanded a feast from the sky. And God said, okay, I'm going to send it down, but if any of you disbelieves, I will punish him severely, more than anybody that I ever punished. Now you know that the punisher will really be Satan, but God, this is God's law. When they disbelieve, they step out of God's kingdom, then Satan will inflict the damage, but God is doing everything. So even the actions of Satan are under God's control. God is running everything. God will not be a God if he wasn't running everything. So this is a quality of God that we must recognize. And we're going to commemorate it. This is in our own language, in English. And you drive your car and you say God is running everything. And you look at everything and you say God is running everything. Because this is the condition of belief in God. The Quran says very clearly, when something good happens to you, it is from God. When something bad happens to you, it is from you. But God is running everything. God created the fire. You can use it to cook a steak, from a raw steak to a delicious cooked steak, unless you like it raw. But you can also put your finger in that fire and burn your finger. So God created the fire to be in your service, but if you choose to put your finger in it and suffer, then this is from you, not from God. But it is God's law that made the fire as burning. If you put your finger in it, it burns. It's God's law. It's one of the physical laws. There are many invisible laws. Like if you disobey God, if you go drink, for example, it's exactly like putting your finger in the fire, but the punishment is not as visible. You can be sure you'll pay. It's just like that, like the fire and putting your finger in it. Alcohol and drinking it. Drugs and taking them. Adultery and committing it. All these things, there are laws that God's laws govern them. And the punishment, the physical, the fire, putting your finger in it, the punishment for God for the sins are exactly in the same way, but they're not as visible. They're just as painful, if not worse. And this explains all the problems we see in the world. The people breaking God's law and paying the price. Just like putting their finger in the fire. What is our role? What do we do? God is doing everything. We do only one thing. One decision. To be with God or not. After that, God takes over. But we are absolutely free in that decision. To submit is already done. And the choice, our choice, is to willingly submit or unwillingly submit. And those people who don't believe in God out there, they are submitting to God except unwillingly. I mean, they can control the number of beats of their heart, for example. I mean, that's one of the visible things. But God runs everything. When Reagan decides to agree with the Russians on limiting nuclear weapons, he's not deciding anything. He's just like Joseph's brothers. He thinks he's deciding to meet with the Russians, or vice versa. But God runs everything. We know also that the angels are as free as we are, from the incident where Satan refused to obey God and bow down before Adam. God wants his creatures to be free as far as that decision is concerned, until the day of judgment. The eternal day of judgment, there's no more. We'll see everything, and we'll submit. Everybody will submit, including the dwellers of hell. It turns out that if we believe that anybody is doing anything, this is shirk. This is idol worship. You're putting somebody who's doing something with God next to God. It negates the idea that God runs everything. So if you think anybody is doing anything, I mean, this is, by definition, is shirk, idolatry. This is why we're going to remind ourselves, against Satan's ideas. We're going to always say, God runs everything. You're going to do it for a while and then you'll forget, like I forget. So I'm going to keep after me and after you, and we're going to repeat that. I'm going to remind you and you remind me, and we will always continuously, until every cell in our body is declaring God is running everything. Because this, like I said, sheds a whole new light on submission, the idea of submission. And this sign out there on the wall, happiness is submission to God, is a profound sign. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. You're going to be perfectly happy. And this dhikr, where God runs everything, is going to help you into total submission. Because anytime you start to complain or object, you're going to remind yourself, God runs everything. I'm complaining against God. I'm complaining from God is doing this, so I'm complaining. I don't like it. Sometimes we turn into complainers, and we have to catch ourselves. Complainers will complain when things are good. They'll complain when things are bad. They get into a rut, and they'll complain continuously. That's objection. That's the opposite of submission. There's a good example of decisions. The main issue of the Muslim perspective, we decided to print a certain number, and we said, okay, we're going to get to these Muslim organizations. They don't deserve the Muslim perspective anyway, so we're going to skip one, do one and skip one. So we'll send only Muslim perspectives to half of them. And okay, we made a decision, right? We make decisions, but God makes the decision, and God's decision prevails. So the next day, the press, they call me and they say, guess what? We made a mistake. So what? So we changed the page. They printed one page on the wrong side. So they have to do it over for nothing. So we ended up with a large number of Muslim perspectives anyway, and we have to send the perspective to everybody. But this is an example of deciding, right? We decided to eliminate these names. But God decided, no, you're going to send it to every single one of them. God runs everything. Okay, tubu ilallah, repent. Tubu ilallah. Allahumma ghfir li warham. Alhamdulillah, وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. I believe this dhikr is very important, very significant, and I believe it's going to help all of us. So I'm going to repeat again, impress on you that wherever you have a chance, continuously, God is running everything, God is running everything, God is running everything. Silently and loudly, and every chance you get. And eventually, like I said, every cell in your body will be pronouncing this important decision. This is the requirement to make it to heaven. I want to talk again about being upset and fighting with anybody. Being upset, complaining, fighting. For your own good, you shouldn't do that. We should not do that for our own good, because it backfires manifold. When you say a hurting word or a hurting look, the Quran goes all the way to suspicion. Inside of your head, if you're suspicious of some, you look at me and I have a stomach ache or something and I'm making a face and you say, this guy is not friendly to me, you've committed a sin. And it's going to backfire on you. You're the one who's going to suffer. You must seek excuses for the people. If I pass by you and I'm making a face, it is not because I hate you. Probably I do. Maybe I do. But what you are supposed to do is, oh, he must have a headache or a stomach ache or something is bothering him. And you love me instead of hate me for your own good. But if I am making a face, if I'm passing by you and I'm making a face, and you assume that I do it because I don't like you, and it is true, even that little suspicion in your head will hurt you, will backfire on you. So let alone being loud, calling names. These backfire on you for your own protection, for your own peace of mind and happiness. Don't do it. And the reason is that the mechanism of it is that it is objection. It is complaining against what God is doing. God is running everything. And if your husband or wife or your friend is behaving in a certain way, it's because of something you have done. You have to join your wife or your husband or your friend and call you names or whatever the other person is doing. You ally yourself with your enemy against yourself because it's something you have done. So God is punishing me for something I have done. I have stepped out of God's laws. And always remind yourself, God is running everything. And don't say, I'm talking to somebody else. I'm talking to you, every one of you. And me. I have to remind myself. I think I'm the oldest person in this place. Anybody older than me? Gosh. See, from my experience, as being your elder, I'll give myself the privilege of advising you. From experience, it backfires on you when you lose your temper. Happiness is submission to God. You have to make a decision right now that you will never be upset, you will never complain. Let other people complain. Let them be upset. Let them call you names. You take the defeated side because for your own good. Because believe me, you're a lot happier this way. And you end up victorious. There is nothing in this world that is worth being upset about. Believing that God runs everything, as you read in the Quran, equals, or is better than, is better than owning everything in this world and twice as much. If you own Manhattan and all the real estate on Manhattan, they consider you rich. So I'm not talking about Manhattan, I'm talking about all of the United States, all of Japan. If you own Hong Kong, you'll be rich with all the real estate over there. But believing in God the proper way is better than owning everything in the whole world and twice as much. Does this make you happy? It should. The simplest thing you do as a believer which is praying 5 times a day. If you put it in the right perspective of a person who believes, is the greatest thing that can happen to anybody. Okay, I want you to put yourself in this situation. You receive a telephone call from the White House. You say, Frank, Jürgen, you're invited to have lunch with the president next Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to use Frank as an example. Frank immediately will call his work. I'm not coming to work on Wednesday. And will call his friends. Guess what? I'm invited to lunch at the White House. And he'll find the best clothes to put on for that important meeting. Well, 5 times a day you have an appointment with the King of Kings. If you believe that God runs everything, that God is the president of the whole world, that Reagan is a dinky servant, an insignificant creature of God, if you really know that, well, is this what you will do for every prayer? You have an appointment with God 5 times a day. You're going to call work and say, I'm not coming to work because I have an appointment with the president of the whole universe. So this puts things in perspective. You're going to seek excuses not to go to the White House? I have a headache, Mr. President. Most people will go even though they have the worst headache, a migraine, you know, they'll still go. Okay, I finished the main topic, and there are 2 points that I would like to mention before I close. One of them is something that I started to do. I should have done it a long time ago. There's a statement in the Quran that says, eat and drink, but in moderation, not too much. So I started doing this after Ramadan, and it feels great not to fill your stomach too much. I mean, look at the wisdom of the Quran. Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat and drink, but in moderation, not too much. And it's a great thing. If I continued the same, I wouldn't be able to wear this suit. So I'm beginning to put on some of my clothes that I had discarded. God created in the universe. This will help us appreciate God and how He is running everything, and will induce us to make this new dhikr continuously. In the last issue of Parade magazine, Carl Sagan wrote an article about billions and billions. God created 1 billion trillion stars. Now forget the planets that go with these stars, and forget the fact that the sun is one of the dim stars. A bright star is defined as a star that is 1 million times, at least 1 million times as bright as our sun. So God created 1 billion trillion stars. And here there's a table from Parade that says how long it would take to count to this number. You know, the billion trillion, or 1 billion trillion will have 7 times 3, 21 zeros, which will make it a septillion. 1 billion trillion is a septillion, okay? So, but here they went as far as a quintillion. Okay, let's just go to the small number, okay? Quintillion. Yeah. Quintillion is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times 3, only 18, not 21. The quintillion, how long it will take you to count this number from 0, 1 count per second, night and day. You know how long it will take you to count the quintillion? Let's forget the other 1 million stars. And let's forget the planets and the heavenly bodies and all this. It will take you, listen to this, you're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, just counting, okay? Not creating, counting. It's going to take you 32 billion years, which is more than the age of the universe. Okay? I mean, the universe is not 32 billion years, but if you just count, you look at the stars and count them one by one, it's going to take you 32 billion. This is mathematics, because you divide the quintillion by the seconds and the minutes and the days and so on. It will take you 32 billion years to just count them. And God created them. Okay, so you can appreciate the greatness of God. أقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى.
الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي العظيم سبحان ربي العظيم سبحان ربي العظيم.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى سبحان ربي الأعلى.
الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Roll call.
Mr. Miller. Here. Mr. Barrow. Here. Ms. Heckman. Here. Mr. Ford.
Mr. Ford is excused.
Mr. Laws. Here. Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here. Item 2.
Invocation, Pledge of Allegiance.
The invocation this evening will be given by Imam Rashad Khalifa of the Islamic Mosque of Tucson. Will you please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, praise be to God, Lord of the universe, the most gracious, the most merciful, Master of the day of recompense. Only you we worship, only you we ask for help. Guide us in the right path, the path of those who deserve your blessings, not of those who incur your displeasure, nor of those who go astray. Amen.
United in this place of prayer, each individual soul joined in a community of worship. One God.
Praise God. We bear witness that there is no God except the one God. There is no other gods or idols besides Him. In the last khutbah, we reached the conclusion that you do not really believe in God unless you know that He's doing everything. You make the initial decision. This is our role. We make a decision to be with God or not. And not means you be with Satan, because there is no other choice. You're either with God or with Satan. And this is the decision we have, where we have absolute freedom of choice. After that, you're either guided by God or messed up by Satan. But the ultimate doer of everything is God. And everything is happening in accordance with God's will. I want today to compare our priorities. I just remembered an idea. I have to write it down so I don't forget. I want to use the board here to illustrate something about priorities. Most people do not know who they are. We recognize now the human being as consisting of two entities. Just to make it very simple, the body and the soul. The body goes on for, let's be optimistic, about 100 years. And then it dies, becomes nothing. The soul is the real person, the real you. This is the real person right here. And it goes on for eternity. The body has requirements, and the soul has requirements. The body, now what I want to compare here is what we do for this entity and what we do for this entity. For this entity, people start with the infant. The infant is given milk and nourished, given shots, painful shots, and growing pains, and teething. And then they go to school, the body goes to school. You know, you have to go to school, right? If you want to be, there's a commercial on the radio and TV now by, what is the name of that comic cat? Garfield. He said, if you want to be a fat cat, go to school. Go to college, I think he said. So you go to school and you take tests and go through the homeworks and the absence reports and chastising from the parents and the teachers and working very hard studying. You know, school is not popular with most of us. You go through grade school, junior high school, then you go to high school and all the hard work involved in it, and you're so glad to graduate only to go into college. Then you're a freshman and you study very hard and work and you're very busy, you know, devoting a lot of effort and time and money to go to school. Because, why? Because this body, you want it to dress nicely, you have good clothes, and you want to buy a house, preferably in the foothills, with so many rooms and luxuries and carpets and drapes. This body wants that, and you work hard for that. You graduate from college and you apply for jobs. You go to the placement office and you stand in line for the interviewer, the people who interview you, and you are very polite to be interviewed. You want to be bright, you want to pretend to be bright, and you want to put on your best appearance and some sense of humor and intelligence, abilities. You know, you pretend to be perfect for the interview, and you get the job. And then you do a lousy job and you're fired. Then you're applying for other jobs and you're miserable. You know, all this is for the body, because the body wants clothes, housing, food. And we do all this work for the body. Now, what are they doing for the soul? The average person. Now, this is the real person. Now, after all this, the body dies, goes to dust, comes nothing. was a person, this body would belong to a person called Rock Hudson. Remember that name? Rock Hudson. Okay, he died recently. That's why you still remember him. And Rock Hudson was a very successful person. Lots of money, fame, covers, magazine covers, and the front covers, TV, movies, wealth, Beverly Hills mansion. His body had a lot of fun. And he also broke God's law, as we know, and he died in humiliation. Now the real person, Rock Hudson, does exist. The real person. What did he do for this body, and what did he do for this? What did the fame and money and bring him? What was the value of the fame and the money that he accumulated? Remember George Liberace? The glitter, the suits that he was wearing, and the showmanship and the clapping, the people clapping for him, the performances he gave, and how many millions of dollars he made. But how much does he, the real person, have? At the end, the mortician was afraid to touch him because of the virus, AIDS virus. Rockefeller, any of them. So the body, people work very hard for this entity here. And what do they do for the soul? This is the question. What I'm trying to bring out is rearranging our priorities, or putting our priorities in perspective. What are we doing for the soul? What does the soul need? The soul needs worshiping God alone. This is the first step, because the soul is part of God in any way you want to look at it, because God said, I blew into Adam from my spirit. So the soul needs to worship God alone, and then it needs food, nutrition. The 5 daily meals, the 5 prayers are needed. You need fasting. People like Rock Hudson, for example, he put himself in the service of this body. He was serving this body. Whatever the body wants, he gave it. But he neglected himself. And if the soul was this size when he started, it is still this size now. Didn't grow, he didn't feed his soul. His priorities were mixed up. I'm using a real person as an example, because here's a person who attained fame and fortune. The conclusion from this is that anything that we do that is not developing our soul is a waste of time. If you do anything that has nothing to do with God, is a waste of time. So when you wake up in the morning, until the end of the day, you ask yourself, am I doing this for God? Which is another word for feeding your soul. Because anything you do for God causes your soul to grow and develop. It is actually for yourself, for the real entity. So we have to rearrange our priorities, put them in perspective. How much of the day are you doing for the body, and how much are you doing for you? You went to school and suffered through examinations to have a good job. What did you do for you? By the way, the 100 years compared to infinity is 0. So this is the proportion that you should do for yourself and for your body. You should do 0 for your body. And you should do 100% for you. It is not intelligent otherwise. Because this is 0. It's going to be nothing. So you have to put this in the service of you, and not the other way around. Almost everybody out there has the priorities reversed. They put this in the service of a vanishing garment. توبوا إلى الله, repent. تبت إلى الله ورجعت إلى الله وندمت على ما فعلت اللهم اغفر لي وارحمني بما تب علي يا رب العالمين. الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. From this diagram, I want to move on to comparing the believer, a Muslim, one who submitted to God, and a regular person. I was looking out the window the other day. I prayed my morning prayer, and about an hour later, one of my neighbors, I was looking out the window and I saw the neighbor coming out, and he was obviously very sleepy. His hair was all messed up, and you can imagine he just got up, you know. He's walking like this, can hardly walk. He's young, I mean, he's not old. His clothes are a mess, and he was out to get the newspaper. Now, a Muslim wakes up in the morning, the first thing he says or she says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah. The first thing a person says. Remember, we pledged this in one of the khutbahs. The first thing you get, I hope you didn't forget. We do forget once in a while, but the first thing when you get up in the morning, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah. Because this is what you will do when you get up on the day of resurrection. Whatever you say every morning. And I have to repeat what the most people say when they get up in the morning and they look in the clock and it is Osh, and that's what they will say. That's exactly what they say on the day of judgment when they get up in the morning. Osh. Because usually they are up late, you know, they get up, they turn the alarm off and go back to sleep. And then when they get up next time, it's too late, and they utter the 4-letter words. So the Muslim gets up in the morning, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah. When you get up on the day of resurrection, if this is a habit here, it's going to be a habit also on the day of judgment. God will see to it. God will help you. And there is no place to go to when you get up on the day of resurrection saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah. There's only one God. There's no place to go but heaven on the day of resurrection. So this is what the Muslim does. Now, what did my neighbor do when he got up in the morning? Looking for the paper. God is not on his mind. Just like the average person. I hope God was on his mind, but it didn't look like it. And then the Muslim goes to do his ablution or her ablution. So you go and do ablution in the morning and you pray the morning. This is the first thing you do. And this act of ablution and the morning prayer is very refreshing. You're alert, you look nice, you washed your face, you combed your hair. You will not look like this guy. I mean, he really looked terrible. You only see that in the movies. Somebody just got up out of bed, you know. The Muslim commemorates God in every chance he or she gets. The Muslim sees the sun rise and says, Subhanallah. So all these are nutritions for the soul, for you, the real person. And your soul grows when you say, Subhanallah, glory be to God, as you see the sun rising. Because you're always conscious of God. The sun is rising exactly at the precise second, and from the same spot that it is supposed to, without delay. And God committed that sun in your service. And you say, Subhanallah. You look at a flower and you do the same thing. Then you make a telephone call to one of your friends or associate and you say, tomorrow I'm going to do this and that, inshallah, God willing. There's a certain behavior of the person who has submitted to God, because you know that God is doing everything, and you know that you will do this and that tomorrow only because God wills. That God will do that. And the Quran gives you this very, very clear commandment. And then your kids get up and you admire them and you say, MashaAllah, this is God's giving to you. This is God's will that you have these children. And you thank God. Now the non-Muslim is unaware. God is not on his or her mind at all. And they are neglecting the real person, themselves, neglecting themselves. They'll be very careful to have breakfast. But they will not give breakfast to their soul. So you are living 24 hours a day, you are commemorating your Creator. And your Creator doesn't need that. God doesn't need any of our praise or our worship. We do. So you are being prepared for the eternal life, which is coming. You don't see anybody around who's 200 years old, do you? You haven't heard of anyone. It's coming, the day of resurrection. And then you'll be assigned that eternal rank, depending on the spot where you qualify, how much growth you did. So far I talked about rearranging the priorities, or putting the priorities in perspective, and how much time we devote to your soul, how much time, the real person, and how much time you give to your job and your boss and your family and so on. Strictly, you can give time to your family in the cause of God. Our priorities must be in perspective. This is why you are here for the Friday prayer. You dropped all business and you are here for the Friday prayer. This is the correct priority. Anytime you are not here on Friday, you're out of God's grace. It's a commandment for every Friday. You drop all business and you go to the Friday prayer. And God associates this with business and profit. And God says it is better for you to drop business. Because God runs the world, God is doing everything. And when you drop your business and go to the Friday prayer as God commands you to, God will see to it that you make more money, more profit. And you don't care, but it will come. Rearranging or putting our priorities in perspective. I'm going to read a couple of verses from the Quran that deal with this subject of priorities. In Surah 18, starting at verse 45, it says, "Cite for them, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in God from Satan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God." It says, cite for them the example of this world, like sending water from the sky that causes plants to grow on the earth and then turns to hay, blown away by the wind. This is this world. This is the example of this world in verse 45 of Surah 18. The plant grows, it is strong. You see all those flowers out there? They're very nice. Watch them. They're going to turn into dry, something like hay, and they blow away. In fact, the time will come and you will say, want to remove this stuff from here. It's going to be dry and shriveled. And this is how this world is. The next verse, it says that money and children are the beauty of this life, or the adornments of this life. This is what are the good things of this life. Money and children. In Arabic, al-mal wal-banuna zinatul hayat ad-dunya. And I've heard many people, they say, God says that money and children are the adornment of this life. I have lots of children, where is the money? So, but generally, money and children are adorning, are the beauties or the adornment of this life. And then the rest of the verse says, however, the eternal righteous works, وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ in Arabic, that the righteous works that last forever, we're talking about the real person here, are far better for you. So money and children and properties in this world, they are the good things in this life. And God tells us what is better than that. Like I mentioned in the last khutbah, worshipping God alone and nourishing your real person, the Quran says, is much better than owning everything on this earth and twice as much. All the real estate in Vancouver and New York, all the real estate in the whole world, all the oil, the gold, the diamonds, believing in God alone and feeding, nourishing your real person is much better. When you have the right perspective, is much better than owning everything on earth and twice as much. So this verse 46 of Surah 18 says, money and children are the beauties or the good things of this world, but the righteous works that last forever are far better and provide better hope. وَخَيْرٌ أَمَلًا. The end of the verse is خَيْرٌ أَمَلًا. There is better hope in them. If there is no hope in the properties, Rock Hudson was very famous and very rich. George Liberati's mansion, still you can go as a tourist and look at it, but he's not there because there's something better that he could have acquired. That is righteous works and developing his soul in order to withstand life next to God in the hereafter. If he didn't develop his soul, he will not stand being close to God. And the verse 47 says, because the day will come when we remove the mountains and you see the earth barren, everything will go, and then we will gather every single one. The Arabic says, فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. We will not leave a single person. God says we're going to gather everybody for this reckoning. How much did you do for this vanishing garment? How much did you do for yourself? The reckoning is going to be automatic, but every single one will come to account. The next verses go on and describe why the righteous works and feeding your soul is the number one priority. That when you do anything else, it's a waste of time. Anything else that does not develop your soul is a waste of time. And missing a Friday prayer, I'm missing this because you're all here. When you miss a Friday prayer for any reason, it's a terrible, terrible loss. Because being once a week a congregational prayer where you meet your brothers and sisters, and it's a commandment from God to do this. When you miss it, you miss a lot. I mean, I cannot put it in billions of dollars. We have to we always remember the right perspective. And the advice in Quran is to commemorate God 24 hours a day. Every chance you get, you can turn your work into worship. Yeah, you can take the mail from the fellow. Open it. He has a express mail thing. And I need it. Bring it. These are papers that I need. It's 1 o'clock, so I'm going to read some material and some kind of a quiz. I want you to find out, to think where it is from, okay? Every addition or omission of a word or even of a single letter from the sacred text of the prayers destroys the religious meaning of the prayer as a whole and is to be regarded as a grave sin. A sin which could result in eternal exile for those who commit it. Remember, there are certain statements in the Quran that says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Woe to those who are doing their prayer. I mean, those are people who are doing their prayer, but they end up in the negative because they are heedless of their prayers or because there are other reasons. So you must make sure that your prayer is perfect. Your salat, your contact, I'm not talking about supplications. I'm talking about your contact prayers. It is a recognized statement in the Quran, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Woe to those who are doing their salat prayer, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَهُونَ, who are heedless of their prayers. They are not aware or they are neglecting something. Let me read this again. And I wanted to apply it to our contact prayer here. Barry is visiting us for the first time and he will wonder, why do we do the prayer in Arabic? And why this particular prayer? for example. And all of us ask this question. In fact, it's going to come up. So let me read this again. Every addition or omission of a word or even a single letter. Now, we in this mosque fully appreciate the mathematical composition of everything that's connected with our worships, the Quran, and even the bones in our body and everything else. So we should appreciate what is written here. Every addition or omission of a word or even of a single letter from the sacred text. Al-Fatiha is the sacred text that God gave us. The first surah of Quran. We cannot add anything to it. As you know, Satan succeeded everywhere in the Muslim world. They add the word Ameen. And our people in Washington, D.C. have a radio program, and I have one of the tapes here talking about this Ameen. And they got it from the dictionary, some recognized dictionary, and they read what Ameen is. Turns out to be an old Hebrew, Greek, something word that has nothing to do with Arabic. It is not in the Quran. But here, this is why Satan tricked the people into adding it. Every addition or omission of a word or even a single letter from the sacred text of the prayers destroys the religious meaning of the prayer as a whole and is to be regarded as a grave sin. So here is a person doing the prayer, committing a grave sin. Okay, let me go to another section. As I go, you will guess what I'm reading from. He and his disciples evolved a mystical theory, according to which the words and letters of the various prayers are not accidental, nor are they only vehicles for their literal meaning. I mean, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us in the right path. It's wonderful. But we are not saying the contact prayer for this literal meaning. There is much more to it. So listen to this. Nor are they only vehicles for their literal meaning. Their order, and especially their numbers, we certainly appreciate that, reflect a mystical harmony, a sacred divine rhythm. Next. No change can be tolerated in the text of the prayers, not even a minute one, because every change, even of one letter, would destroy the numerical harmony inherent in the text. So every letter that God composed in the first surah of Quran, Al-Fatiha, is numerically controlled. The sounds, when you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, this is composed by God for a specific reason, a combination that causes your contact with your Creator. So listen, it's coming up. It does not matter, therefore, whether the change is beneficial from the point of view of meaning and content. I mean, you may think of composing a Shakespearean, excellent, literary marvel that praises God. It doesn't mean a thing. Forget it. It is not the meaning we're after. It's the numerical composition and the sounds. For this level of meaning is not the most important one in the prayers. The text was formed by God, I'm adding this by God, to reflect mystical harmony, and any change would destroy it. The second point here is the liturgy, that is the contact prayers, Al-Fatiha. The liturgy received new importance and new meaning within the framework of religious practice after discovering the numerical importance of it. A completely new dimension was added in this way to the daily prayer service. It stopped being just a reciting of requests and praises of God in ancient formulas, Arabic, for example, and became a vehicle for becoming a participant in a mystical divine harmony. The prayers suddenly received a new depth of meaning and importance, which was undreamed of in the 1,000 years that had passed since they were formulated. Next. Okay, this will really tell you what this is coming from. The quiz becomes easier and easier. The fierce polemical tone of Rabbi Judah's criticism of the changes introduced by the Frenchmen in the prayers can therefore be explained as a result of his fear that the prayers may be regarded as completely human in origin and meaning, making them secular and meaningless in religious and mystical practices. A lot of people accuse me of being harsh with some people who are making changes in the prayers or in the Quran or in the practices of religion. But there is a precedent. It is fear for these people, and it is concern for them. According to him, even if the content and meaning of the prayer is religious, expressing love and devotion to God, it still will be just, quote, a secular song like that of the non-Jews, if it does not have the added mystical dimension of hidden truth, which cannot be revealed by the literal meaning of the words alone. In his polemic, Rabbi Judah does not defend only the specific tradition of prayer which he received from his parents and teachers. He also defends prayer as an elevating force, forming a connection salat, a connection between man and God, a connection that no mere words can achieve. So it is not just the words, there's a numerical mysticism in it. And the last section, all God-fearing people, when they pray, have to direct their prayers. When they say, blessed is God, alhamdulillah, when they say, quote unquote, blessed is God, and when they kneel before him and thank him and direct their prayers in their hearts only to his holiness alone, within which is his glory and which has neither form nor image. You direct it to God alone. أقم الصلاة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.